Hey guys, before we settle into tonight's journey, take a moment to like the video if you enjoy these quiet walks through history. And if you're listening from somewhere far away, I'd love to know where you're joining from. It's always comforting to imagine people all across the world drifting off together under the same story. Now, dim the lights a little. Pull the blanket a bit higher. Let your shoulders loosen, your breathing slow, and allow the noise of today to slip quietly into the background. Tonight, you're not climbing into a soft modern bed, you're stepping backward almost 800 years into medieval Europe, where night arrives differently, and sleep is something people endure more than enjoy. The evening sun disappears behind low hills, leaving streaks of amber fading into deep blue. Smoke rises lazily from countless chimneys, carrying the smell of burning oak and damp straw into the cooling air. Somewhere beyond the village, a church bell rings its final notes, echoing softly across fields already swallowed by shadow. You walk slowly along a muddy path, your boots sink slightly into the earth after a day of light rain. Chickens settle beneath wooden carts. A tired dog circles twice before curling against a stable wall. The village itself seems to exhale as daylight fades, not into silence, but into quieter work. A woman gathers the last of her linen before dew settles upon it. An old man pulls heavy shutters across a narrow window. Children chase each other one final time before disappearing indoors, their laughter replaced by the crackle of hearth fires. Sleep is coming, but not comfort. The small cottage waiting for you hardly resembles what you might imagine as a bedroom. There is no private sanctuary waiting behind a closed door. No peaceful retreat filled with soft pillows or clean white sheets. Instead, night belongs to the entire household. The same room where bread was kneaded this morning now begins transforming into a place where people, animals, tools, and everyday life will rest together beneath one roof. Privacy is a luxury few have ever imagined. Even quiet is rare. You pause beneath the low doorway. The oak beam above your head has been polished smooth by generations of hands passing underneath. The heavy wooden door creaks softly as it swings inward, revealing a single flickering fire that paints slow golden patterns across rough stone walls. The warmth feels welcoming for a moment, then your eyes adjust. Bundles of herbs hang drying from dark ceiling beams. Simple wooden stools sit beside a scarred table covered with crumbs from the evening meal. A spinning wheel rests silently in the corner, waiting for tomorrow. Every object remains where it was used because tomorrow will begin exactly where today ended. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is moved simply for comfort. The family greets night with familiar routines that have barely changed across generations. A loaf is wrapped carefully in cloth. The embers are spread beneath ash so they might survive until morning. A wooden latch slides gently into place against the outside world. There are no glowing clocks, no humming machines. No distant traffic, only wind brushing against timber walls, the occasional soft moo from a nearby cow, and the endless breathing of people preparing themselves for another ordinary night. To them, this is simply life. To you, every small detail feels strangely unfamiliar. You begin noticing things modern eyes often overlook. The darkness is deeper, the air feels heavier. Even the floor beneath your boots seems alive with the history of countless footsteps, as your own place for the night slowly comes into view. You realize something unexpected. The hardest part of sleeping in medieval Europe was not simply the bed itself, it was everything surrounding it, and before long, the evening itself would begin to reveal just how different a medieval night could truly feel. The last glow of evening lingers only briefly before surrendering to the slow certainty of night. The little cottage behind you has settled into its evening rhythm, and now, as the fire crackles lower, you begin to understand that darkness in the medieval world is not simply the absence of sunlight. It is an event, a daily arrival that quietly reshapes every part of life. Outside, the village changes character. The paths that bustled with carts and wandering geese only an hour ago are nearly empty. A faint mist gathers over the fields beyond the cottages, softening fences and hedgerows until they seem to disappear into the night itself. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls once, then waits, as though expecting an answer that never comes. Inside the house, no one wastes time. Evening is short, and candle wax is precious. A woman pinches the last threads from a loaf of coarse rye bread before wrapping what remains in linen. Beside her, an elderly man carefully lifts an iron pot away from the fire, scraping every bit of thick barley pottage into small wooden bowls. Nothing is left behind. Every crumb has tomorrow in mind. The youngest child yawns openly. No one tells him it is bedtime. The fading light has already done that. For most people in medieval Europe, the setting sun was the clock that governed nearly every habit. Mechanical clocks existed in only a few monasteries and wealthy towns. And even then they were large, complicated machines that ordinary villagers would never see. Here, people judged the hour by shadows, by birds returning to their nests, and by the familiar rhythm of seasons that repeated year after year. You watch as the family begins securing the house. The heavy wooden door is fastened with a thick oak bar placed across iron brackets. Small shutters close over narrow window openings, blocking the cool evening breeze while leaving only tiny cracks where moonlight can slip through. The room grows noticeably darker with each movement. Then comes the fire. No one allows it to burn freely through the night. Instead, glowing embers are gathered carefully toward the center of the hearth and covered beneath a blanket of ash. Medieval households often banked their fires this way, preserving enough hidden heat that the flames could be coaxed back to life at dawn without striking fresh sparks. Fire was labor. Fire was warmth. Fire was survival. A faint orange glow remains beneath the gray ash, quiet, patient, waiting for morning. The family speaks more softly now, not because someone has asked them to, but because night naturally lowers every voice. Words become fewer. Movements become slower. A wooden spoon is rinsed in a small bucket of water. A bench is nudged against the wall. Someone folds a wool cloak with practiced hands, smoothing its rough surface before laying it nearby for tomorrow. Outside, another church bell rings. Its sound travels far across sleeping fields. In many villages, the evening bell, sometimes called the curfew bell, served as a signal to cover household fires, secure homes, and end the day's work. The very word curfew comes from the old Norman French phrase couvre-feu, meaning cover the fire. It was less an order than a shared rhythm, reminding entire communities that night belonged to rest. The moon climbs higher. Clouds drift lazily across its pale face, casting gentle shadows over thatched roofs. A cool breeze slips beneath the cottage door, carrying the earthy scent of damp soil and distant forests. Somewhere nearby, a horse shifts quietly inside its stable, the soft scrape of a hoof against packed ground blending with the occasional rustle of sleeping chickens. No lamps glow from neighboring homes. Most have already gone dark. Oil is costly. Candles consume valuable tallow or beeswax. Light itself is something to be measured carefully, not taken for granted. You notice how your own eyes begin adjusting. Shapes replace details. The room becomes familiar not because you can clearly see it, but because you slowly remember where everything rests. The table, the hearth, The stool near the wall. The woven basket beside the doorway. This darkness is no enemy, it is simply another companion of ordinary life. You settle onto the edge of a rough wooden bench and listen, breathing, crackling embers, the distant sigh of wind through the thatched roof. Night has fully arrived now, gentle and unhurried, wrapping the cottage in quiet layers that seem almost timeless, and as the household prepares for sleep, you begin to notice that there is something rather unusual about where that sleep will actually take place. The cottage has grown wonderfully still, only the faint orange glow beneath the hearth reminds you that a fire was alive here only moments ago. Outside, the wind brushes gently against the thatched roof, and somewhere beyond the walls an owl calls into the darkness. Your eyes have finally adjusted, and what seemed like a bedroom waiting in the shadows begins to reveal something rather unexpected. There isn't one, not in the way you would recognize today. You look around the room once more, expecting a hidden doorway or a staircase leading to a quieter place upstairs. Instead, you find the same wooden table where supper was eaten. The same spinning wheel waiting for tomorrow's work. The same shelves holding clay pots and bundles of onions hanging from the beams. Nothing has changed except the purpose of the room. For many ordinary families throughout medieval Europe, the idea of a dedicated bedroom simply did not exist. The main hall served nearly every purpose imaginable. It was kitchen, dining room, workshop, gathering place, and when darkness arrived, it quietly transformed into a sleeping chamber for everyone beneath its roof. The change happens almost without words. A young woman lifts a heavy bench away from the center of the room, creating space across the packed earth floor. An older man folds away a rough trestle table, its wooden legs tucked neatly against the wall. A basket of spinning wool is carried into a corner. Every movement has been repeated so many evenings that no one needs instructions. The room breathes differently now, not larger, simply emptier. Children fetch bundles of straw wrapped inside coarse linen ticking. They drag them across the floor with sleepy determination, arranging them wherever there is enough room. One lies close beside the hearth to steal a little warmth from the hidden embers. Another is placed beneath the small shuttered window where the air feels cooler. There are no assigned bedrooms, only familiar places. You notice an elderly grandmother settling into the same corner she has likely used for years. A younger couple spread their bedding near one wall while two brothers argue quietly over whose sleeping place is closest to the fire. Their disagreement lasts only a moment before a tired smile ends the matter. Sleep, after all, is coming quickly. The house itself reflects centuries of practical building rather than comfort. Thick oak beams support a roof woven from straw and reeds. Between the wooden framework, walls are packed with wattle and daub, a mixture of woven branches coated in mud, clay, straw, and animal dung. Once dried, these walls held warmth surprisingly well, though tiny cracks often admitted wandering drafts during colder months. Above your head, the rafters disappear into darkness. They are blackened by decades of wood smoke rising from the open hearth below. Since most peasant cottages lacked chimneys for much of the medieval period, smoke drifted upward before slowly escaping through small roof openings or loose thatch. The air never becomes completely clear. A faint smoky scent lingers everywhere, not unpleasant, simply familiar. You glance toward the far end of the hall. A woven curtain hangs loosely from a wooden pole, creating a little privacy around a family's sleeping place. It is one of the few attempts to divide the room. And even then, the thin fabric muffles almost nothing. A whispered conversation travels easily through it. Privacy is measured in gestures rather than walls. A turned back, a lowered voice, a respectful glance away. In wealthier homes, sleeping arrangements gradually became more elaborate. Stone manor houses sometimes included an upper chamber reserved for the lord's family, reached by a narrow wooden staircase. Yet even there, servants frequently entered throughout the day to tend fires, deliver water, or prepare clothing. Bedrooms remained active places rather than secluded retreats. For ordinary villagers, such separation belonged to another world entirely. Here, everyone shares the same air, the same warmth, the same darkness. As the bedding settles onto the floor, the room loses its appearance as a workshop and becomes something softer. A child hugs a carved wooden toy before placing it beneath folded clothing. Someone murmurs a brief evening prayer. Another stretches tired shoulders after a day in the fields. No one seems surprised by the transformation. To them, this single room has always been enough. It has witnessed births and meals, spinning and storytelling, laughter and grief. Now it witnesses sleep. You lower yourself onto a simple straw pallet and realize how close everyone truly is. Every breath, every quiet cough, every sleepy sigh becomes part of the same shared rhythm. Individual dreams will unfold only a few feet apart, beneath one roof, beneath one thatched ceiling. It feels unfamiliar, yet strangely human. The room itself has become a living thing, changing its purpose with the setting sun and waiting patiently for morning to ask something different of it once again. And as your head begins to rest upon the waiting bedding, you cannot help wondering what, exactly, lies hidden inside the straw beneath you. Morning's work has long faded into memory, the family around you has settled into a quiet rhythm of breathing, and the cottage has become almost completely still. The last glow beneath the hearth has dimmed to little more than a warm memory hidden beneath pale ash. You shift ever so slightly upon your bedding, hoping to find a softer place for your shoulder. Instead, the mattress answers with a dry, whispering rustle. It is not filled with feathers, not with cotton, certainly not with springs. Beneath the coarse linen covering lies a thick layer of straw, gathered from the previous harvest and packed tightly into a simple cloth sack. This humble pallet is one of the most common beds in medieval Europe, especially among farming families whose wealth is measured more by healthy fields than comfortable furniture. At first, the straw feels surprisingly firm. Each stalk presses gently against the next, creating uneven little ridges beneath your weight. Some sections are flattened from months of use, while others remain stiff and springy. You roll onto one side and discover that comfort depends less on the mattress itself and more on finding the place where the straw has settled kindly. No two spots feel exactly alike. The linen cover scratches faintly against your hands. It has been woven from coarse flax, strong enough to survive years of use but far from smooth. Small patches reveal careful repairs where worn fabric has been stitched again and again rather than replaced. Every thread tells the quiet story of thrift. Nothing here is discarded while it can still serve another season. A little girl nearby curls herself tighter beneath a wool blanket. Without waking fully, she pats her mattress once or twice, almost by instinct, gently pushing the straw back beneath her shoulders. Even in sleep, people know that straw slowly shifts during the night, gathering into uneven bundles unless it is spread again with practiced hands. This simple adjustment has likely been repeated thousands of evenings throughout her life, and thousands before hers. Fresh straw, however, never remains fresh for long. Over weeks and months, every sleeper compresses it. The hollow stems begin breaking into shorter pieces. Fine dust settles toward the bottom of the ticking. Damp air from autumn rain slowly softens the fibers. Gradually, the pleasant scent of dried grain gives way to something earthier. Older, quietly familiar, most households replaced mattress straw only occasionally, often after harvest when new supplies became available. Until then, families simply endured the gradual decline, fluffing and shaking the bedding whenever possible to restore a little softness. It was practical, affordable, entirely ordinary. You reach carefully beneath the edge of the mattress, a few loose stalks slide free. Mixed among them are tiny fragments of dried leaves and bits of chaff that escaped the threshing floor months earlier. Medieval farmers wasted little. Straw left after harvesting wheat, rye, or oats found countless uses: roof thatching, animal bedding, basket weaving. And of course, mattresses. Every part of the harvest lived several lives. As your fingers brush deeper into the stuffing, you notice something else: movement. Tiny, almost invisible. The medieval home was never perfectly sealed against the natural world. Cracks beneath doors welcomed cool breezes and smaller visitors. Straw itself, gathered from open fields and stored inside barns, sometimes carried insects or their eggs into the house before anyone noticed. Over time, mattresses became inviting homes for creatures seeking warmth alongside the sleeping family: minute beetles, harvest mites, occasionally small spiders weaving delicate webs between forgotten stalks. Most caused little concern. People expected nature to remain close. Complete separation between indoors and outdoors was nearly impossible in timber cottages built from local materials. The fields, the animals, and the household formed one connected world. Even so, careful housekeepers did what they could. On bright summer mornings, mattresses were often carried outside into open sunlight. Several family members would beat them vigorously with wooden sticks, sending clouds of dust dancing into the air while fresh breezes helped dry lingering moisture. The work was tiring, but sunshine and fresh air were among the simplest ways to refresh old bedding before another season of use. You imagine that familiar scene: children laughing as dust swirls around them, an older woman inspecting torn seams before mending them with heavy linen thread, bundles of clean straw waiting nearby after harvest. Simple work, steady work, necessary work. The pallet beneath you creaks softly as you settle once more. It will never feel luxurious, yet for the people who sleep upon it every night, luxury is not the goal. Warmth is, rest is, tomorrow's strength is. Comfort, when it comes at all, is found not in perfect bedding, but in familiar routines repeated across countless evenings until even a bed of straw begins to feel like home. And before this quiet night is over, you'll discover that what rested above the mattress could be just as revealing as what lay beneath it. The straw beneath you has finally grown familiar. Its uneven ridges no longer surprise your back, and the quiet sounds of the cottage have blended into a gentle lullaby of breathing, faint crackling embers, and the occasional whisper of wind finding its way through the thatched roof. Yet as the warmth beneath you slowly escapes into the cool earth below, your attention turns upward, to what covers you. At first glance, it hardly seems like much. A single heavy blanket lies folded at the foot of the pallet. It is thick, rough, and surprisingly weighty when you pull it across your body. The coarse wool brushes against your hands with a texture that is far from soft, almost scratchy against exposed skin. Yet there is reassurance in its weight. It feels less like luxury and more like protection. The blanket carries the faint scent of lanolin, the natural oil that remains in sheep's wool even after cleaning. Mixed with it are traces of smoke from countless evenings beside the hearth and the clean smell of cool autumn air absorbed during long days hanging outside to dry. Its colors are gentle, not bright blues or vivid reds. Instead, soft browns, weathered grays, and creamy whites woven from the natural shades of local sheep. Dye was expensive, and for ordinary households, beauty often came from simplicity rather than decoration. A woman across the room carefully tucks the edge of her blanket around a sleeping child. She does not smooth it delicately, she presses it firmly beneath the little one's shoulders, trapping every possible bit of warmth. In a medieval home, a blanket was expected to hold heat, not simply cover a bed. Winter nights demanded practicality above all else. You soon understand why, even inside the cottage, the cold slowly creeps through the walls. The fire has been banked beneath ash, preserving tomorrow's flames, but little warmth now reaches the far corners of the room. The thick wool acts almost like a shield, capturing the warmth your own body creates and refusing to let it escape too quickly into the night. It is remarkably effective, even if it is not particularly comfortable. Many blankets were woven on simple upright looms found inside villages across Europe. Wool from local sheep was washed, carded by hand, spun carefully into yarn using wooden drop spindles, and finally woven into thick cloth that could withstand years of daily use. Every blanket represented countless hours of quiet labor, often completed during long winter evenings when fieldwork became impossible. Nothing about it was hurried, every thread had passed through someone's hands. You pull the blanket a little closer beneath your chin, tiny imperfections reveal themselves in the weave. Here, a careful repair joins two worn sections with slightly darker wool. There, one edge has been reinforced after years of fraying. These are not flaws, they are memories. Each stitch quietly records another season survived. Not every sleeper enjoys such warmth. Near the doorway, a young servant wraps himself in little more than a simple wool cloak. Without enough blankets for everyone, outer garments often serve double duty during the night. Thick cloaks, worn throughout the day against rain and cold, became makeshift bedding once evening arrived. No one considered this unusual. Clothing and blankets belong to the same careful economy of necessity. In wealthier households, however, the story looked rather different. A noble family's bed might be dressed with feather-filled quilts, imported linen sheets, or blankets trimmed with decorative borders. Rich merchants sometimes owned colorful coverlets dyed with costly madder or woad, their deep reds and blues quietly displaying prosperity to visitors. Yet even these grand beds served the same purpose, to keep warmth close. Stone castles, despite their impressive walls, often remained colder than humble cottages. Great halls echoed with chilly draughts, and thick curtains surrounded noble beds not simply for elegance but to trap precious heat during long winter nights. Whether rich or poor, everyone searched for warmth in remarkably similar ways. You listen as the room settles further into silence. Someone turns over, causing wool to rustle softly. A child sighs in sleep. The wind brushes against the shutters once more before drifting away into the darkness beyond. Your own blanket grows warmer now. Its roughness fades from notice. Its weight becomes comforting. It seems almost remarkable that something woven from the fleece of quiet grazing sheep could become the final barrier between peaceful rest and the endless chill outside. You close your eyes for a moment, wrapped securely beneath layers of simple wool, and realize that warmth in the medieval world was never taken for granted. It was earned, woven, shared, and as sleep slowly settles across the cottage, you begin to notice something else lingering in the air, something no blanket, however thick, could ever completely keep away. The wool blanket settles over you, holding a small pocket of warmth against the cold night air. The cottage has become quieter now, with every person finding their familiar place beneath rough layers of fabric and straw. Yet as you are just beneath the heavy covering, you notice something unusual. No one is changing into sleepwear. There are no loose cotton garments waiting beside the bed, No carefully folded clothes placed aside for morning. The clothing worn throughout the day remains exactly where it is. At first, it feels strange. You imagine lying down after a long day of work, still dressed in the same tunic that carried you through fields, workshops, and village paths. Yet in medieval Europe, this was not unusual. For many people, sleeping in their everyday clothing was simply another practical response to a world where warmth, fabric, and time were all valuable. A man near the hearth slowly removes his belt and sets it beside him. That is the main change. Heavy items are taken away, a knife used during the day, a pouch holding small belongings, a pair of muddy shoes left near the doorway, but the wool tunic remains, the linen undergarment remains. The layers that protect him from cold remain. The evening air inside the cottage is not gentle. Even with several people sharing the same room, drafts move through small openings between wooden beams and around shutters. The floor beneath the bedding holds the memory of the earth outside, releasing a steady chill that rises through the night. Clothing becomes another blanket, another layer between the body and the cold. For ordinary villagers, garments were expensive possessions. A single tunic could require large amounts of wool or linen, hours of spinning, weaving, and sewing, and constant repair throughout its life. Clothing was not something to be casually changed and cleaned every evening. A person might own only a few important pieces. The same tunic could serve through countless mornings. The same cloak could protect against rain, wind, and winter darkness. The same belt might hold together the necessities of daily life. You watch as an elderly farmer pulls his cloak around his shoulders before lying down. The fabric is worn smooth in places from years of use, but he treats it carefully. A small tear near the edge has been repaired with darker thread, creating a pattern that almost looks intentional. Nothing is thrown away quickly, everything is given another chance. This habit shaped medieval clothing culture. Mending was not an occasional task, it was part of ordinary life. Needles, thread, and scraps of fabric were valuable tools found in many households. A damaged sleeve could be patched. A worn cloak could be turned into another garment. Children often received clothing altered from older family members. The fabric carried a history. A sleeve could belong to one person today and another tomorrow. As the night deepens, you notice how the clothing changes the way people sleep. Movement is limited. Thick wool does not fold easily. Linen wrinkles beneath the body. Belts and small objects must be removed carefully so they do not press uncomfortably through the night. Yet no one complains. This is simply how rest works. In wealthier households, sleeping arrangements could be slightly different. Noble families sometimes wore specialized linen sleeping garments, especially in larger homes where more fabric and servants were available. But even among the wealthy, the idea of modern pajamas did not exist. Night clothing remained practical, often resembling simple versions of daytime garments. The difference was not between wearing clothes and not wearing clothes. It was between having more choices and fewer. A castle chamber with thick curtains and servants preparing the bed offered greater comfort, but even there, cold remained a constant companion. You listened to the quiet sounds around you, the soft movement of wool, the occasional cough, the gentle shift of someone searching for a warmer position. The cottage sleeps as one living space, wrapped in layers of fabric, straw, and shared body heat. Your own clothes feel different now. At first, they seemed like something forgotten, something that should have been removed before rest. But here, beneath the medieval roof, they make sense. They are not only clothing, they are insulation, they are protection. They are another small piece of preparation. Before surrendering to the night, and as you settle deeper into the darkness, you begin to notice that the room itself carries another presence, a collection of familiar smells that reveal exactly how close medieval life truly was. The quiet movement of wool has faded into the background. The cottage sleeps beneath its heavy roof of straw and timber, and for a moment, the darkness feels almost peaceful. You lie beneath the blanket, surrounded by the slow breathing of the household, listening to the small sounds that appear only after everyone has stopped moving, a creaking beam, a faint crackle beneath the ash-covered hearth, the soft rustle of someone turning over on their straw mattress. But as the night settles deeper, you begin to notice something else. The air. It has a presence of its own. A medieval bedroom, if it could be called a bedroom at all, carried the sense of everything that happened there during the day. The sleeping space was not separated from daily life. It was the same room where meals were prepared, animals might be sheltered nearby, clothing was repaired, tools were stored, and fires burned for warmth. Every activity left a trace. The first scent you notice is smoke. It clings gently to almost everything. The wooden beams above you have absorbed years of rising hearth smoke. The wool blanket around your shoulders carries the same familiar smell. Even clothing hanging nearby holds the memory of countless evenings spent beside the fire. In many medieval homes, especially smaller cottages, open hearths sat in the center of the main room. Without modern chimneys and ventilation systems, smoke traveled upward slowly, finding gaps in roofs or openings designed to release some of it. The result was a home that always carried a faint smoky character, not fresh, not unpleasant, simply lived in. Then comes the smell of wool, the blanket beneath your fingers, the cloak folded beside the wall, the thick clothing worn throughout the day. Medieval households depended heavily on wool because sheep were common across much of Europe, and wool provided warmth even when damp. But wool also absorbed the scents around it. Rain, smoke, animals, human effort. A cloak worn through muddy fields would eventually carry the story of those fields. A blanket beside the hearth would remember every winter evening it survived. Nearby, a bundle of dried herbs hangs from the ceiling. Their purpose is partly practical. Plants such as lavender, rosemary, mint, and other fragrant herbs were sometimes used in households to add pleasant scents and discourage unwanted insects. They were placed among clothing, bedding, and storage areas. Their aroma mixed with the stronger smells of daily life, creating a strange combination of earthiness and freshness. You imagine a woman reaching upward before bed, touching the small bundle hanging from the wooden beam. The leaves are dry now. The fragrance is gentle, a small attempt at bringing nature's sweetness indoors. Beyond the sleeping area, another scent quietly remains. Animals. Many medieval cottages were closely connected to the creatures that supported household life. In colder regions, livestock might be sheltered nearby, sometimes within connected buildings or areas sharing the same structure. Chickens, goats, or other animals were valuable sources of food and warmth, and their presence was part of everyday existence. The boundary between human space and animal space was far less distant than it is today. Life was shared, the sounds were shared, even the smells were shared. You begin to understand that medieval people experienced their homes differently. What might seem unpleasant to modern senses was often simply recognized as normal. A house did not smell like nothing, it smelled like firewood, fresh bread, damp wool, earth after rain. People working, animals nearby, life continuing. There was no expectation that a room should erase every trace of human existence. Cleanliness mattered, but it was shaped by available resources and daily habits. Floors were swept. Bedding was shaken. Clothing was washed when possible. Herbs were used. Fires were maintained, people cared for their surroundings, they simply lived closer to the materials of their world. The night grows colder, you pull the blanket closer and notice that the scent of smoke and wool has become strangely comforting. It is the smell of shelter. The smell of a place that has protected generations before you. The cottage is not silent, it is not empty. It breathes with memories. Every beam, every woven thread, every bundle of herbs carries a small piece of the people who have passed through this room. And as you drift deeper into the medieval night, you begin to realize that some of the smallest companions in this sleeping space are not the ones you can see at all, but the ones quietly hiding within it. The cottage has become warmer now, not because the fire burns brighter, but because your senses have slowly adjusted to this unfamiliar world. The smell of smoke, wool, and dried herbs no longer feels strange. The sounds of the household have become a gentle rhythm, breathing, soft movements, the quiet creaking of old wood, yet beneath this peaceful surface, the medieval sleeping place had another reality, one that shared the bed with almost everyone who rested upon it. Small companions, uninvited ones. You shift slightly on the straw mattress and feel the uneven texture beneath the linen covering. It is easy to imagine the bed as a simple object, something separate from the natural world outside. But a medieval bed was never truly separate. It came from the fields, from animals, from plants, from the earth itself, and the living world often followed along. Straw mattresses, especially when used for long periods, provided an ideal environment for tiny creatures searching for warmth. The same dry plant material that gave people a place to rest also offered countless hiding spaces. Small insects could disappear between stalks, beneath folds of fabric, and inside the seams of worn bedding. Among the most familiar nighttime visitors were fleas. They were common throughout medieval Europe, affecting households of every social level. Fleas were not limited to poor homes or dirty environments. They could appear in castles, monasteries, and wealthy chambers just as easily as in simple cottages. A noble bed might have finer fabrics, a peasant's bed might have straw, but neither was completely untouched by nature. You picture the quiet evening scene, a family sleeping peacefully, a wool blanket pulled close, a candle long extinguished, and somewhere within the folds of cloth, tiny movements almost too small to notice. Medieval people understood these problems well, even if they did not understand insects through modern science. They developed practical methods to manage them. Bedding was carried outdoors when weather allowed. Mattresses were shaken. Straw was replaced. Clothing was aired in sunlight. Fresh air was one of the simplest forms of cleaning. Sunlight was a valued ally. On bright mornings, families might open their homes as much as possible, allowing wind and warmth to enter spaces that had remained closed through the cold night. You can imagine the scene after sunrise, a woman lifting a heavy blanket outside, a child helping carry a bundle of old straw, dust floating through golden morning light, the bedding being beaten and turned before being brought back indoors. It was ordinary work. The kind of task that repeated across generations. In larger medieval households, servants often managed these duties. Wealthy homes had more bedding, more rooms, and more fabrics requiring attention. Bed linens might be changed more frequently, and sleeping chambers might be cleaned regularly by household workers. Yet even the richest households faced the same natural challenges. The famous image of a castle bedroom can sometimes feel distant and elegant, with carved wooden beds and embroidered curtains, but behind those beautiful fabrics was still a place where people slept. And where people slept, nature followed. The difference was mostly one of comfort, not complete escape. You notice the small details around the cottage, The blanket has been folded carefully. The mattress has been pushed back into shape. The bundle of herbs rests nearby. Every small effort represents someone's attempt to make the sleeping space cleaner, calmer, and more pleasant. Medieval life was not careless. People valued comfort. They valued cleanliness. They valued a good night's rest. They simply worked with different tools and different expectations. A modern person might imagine the medieval bedroom as a place of constant discomfort, but the reality was more subtle. These conditions were familiar. People adapted because they had grown up surrounded by the same environment. The things that surprise you would barely interrupt their evening routine: a scratch, a restless movement, a blanket shaken out the next morning. Life continued. The household sleeps on. The straw settles. The wool blankets rise and fall with quiet breathing. Outside, the moon moves slowly across the sky, watching over a world where humans and nature remain much closer than they are today. And as you lie there beneath the heavy blanket, you begin to understand that sharing a sleeping space with small creatures was only one kind of company medieval people accepted at night. Soon, you will discover that sometimes the greatest challenge was not what lived inside the bed, but who slept beside you. The night continues quietly around you. The small creatures hidden within the straw are easy to imagine now. But as the candlelight fades completely and the cottage settles into deeper darkness, another reality becomes clear. The medieval bed was rarely a private place. The space beneath the blanket was often shared, not only with family, but sometimes with people you had never met before. You adjust your position on the straw mattress, careful not to disturb those sleeping nearby. In this world, a bed is not always a personal possession. It is a valuable space, a place of warmth, and during long journeys or crowded nights, it may belong to several people at once. The idea feels unusual. A stranger beside you, a different person's breathing in the darkness, a shared blanket between unfamiliar shoulders. Yet throughout medieval Europe, shared sleeping arrangements were common, especially among travelers, workers, servants, and those who could not afford private rooms. The small village in you imagine ahead is already preparing for the night. A wooden sign swings gently outside beneath the moonlight. Inside, the last travelers are finishing their evening meals. A merchant removes his cloak after walking for many miles. A pilgrim places his walking staff against the wall. A craftsman arriving from another town rubs tired hands beside the fire. They have different destinations, different stories, different reasons for traveling, but tonight they share the same roof. The innkeeper leads them upstairs to a simple sleeping chamber. There is no collection of individual rooms waiting behind separate doors. Instead, there is one larger space with wooden beds arranged along the walls. Thick blankets are folded nearby. Candles burn low. The room carries the familiar mixture of smoke, wool, and old timber. The travelers look around, then they choose their places. A bed may hold 2 people, sometimes more. For medieval inns, beds were expensive resources. Providing separate sleeping spaces for every guest would have required much more room and material. Shared beds allowed inns to welcome more travelers while keeping costs manageable. Records from medieval Europe show that bed sharing was not unusual among ordinary travelers. People often accepted it as part of the experience of being away from home. The expectation of personal space was very different from today. Warmth mattered, safety mattered, rest mattered. Privacy came much later. You watch as one traveler carefully removes his boots and places them beside the bed. Another folds a small cloth bundle containing personal belongings and keeps it close. Even among strangers, small habits remain: a polite distance, a quiet greeting, a respectful silence. Not everyone sharing a bed was a stranger. In many households, married couples shared sleeping spaces, and children often slept nearby. Servants working inside larger homes might sleep together in shared quarters. Apprentices living with masters often rested wherever space was available. A medieval home was built around cooperation. Space was limited. People adapted. The wealthy experienced a different version of nighttime. Lords and noble families could have private chambers with larger beds, curtains, and attendants nearby. Even then, servants frequently entered these rooms to tend fires, deliver water, or prepare clothing. A completely private bedroom remained rare. The idea that sleep belonged entirely to one person was simply unfamiliar. The fire in the inn slowly burns lower. Conversation fades. The travelers begin disappearing beneath blankets one by one. A man near the window closes his eyes while listening to the wind outside. Another turns toward the wall, creating a little personal boundary with his back. Someone whispers a final prayer before the room becomes still. The shared bed is not comfortable in the way we might imagine comfort today. There is less space, less silence, less control, yet there is something deeply human about it. Strangers arriving from different roads, carrying different memories, all resting for one night beneath the same wooden roof. The medieval night was filled with closeness. People lived close, worked close, slept close. The boundaries between one person's world and another were much thinner than they are now. As your eyes grow heavy, you begin to understand that the cold medieval night was not faced alone. Warmth often came from another person nearby, from shared blankets, and from the simple fact that someone else was breathing beside you. But as the hours grow colder and the fire fades, another challenge of the medieval bedroom begins to reveal itself: the endless struggle against the chill. The shared sleeping chamber has grown silent. The voices of travelers have disappeared into the darkness, and the last conversations near the fire have faded into memory. Beneath the heavy wool blanket, you search for warmth, slowly realizing that the greatest comfort of the medieval bed was not the softness beneath you. It was the hope that the cold might stay away. But the cold always found a way inside. It slipped through small openings in wooden walls. It traveled beneath doors. It rested quietly in the stones beneath your body. And as the night grows longer, you begin to understand that warmth in medieval Europe was something people constantly worked to preserve, not something they simply expected. The cottage around you is built from materials gathered nearby: oak beams, mud and clay walls, thatched roofing. These materials offered protection, but they could never create the complete separation from nature that modern homes provide. The outside world remained close. Every season announced itself indoors. Summer brought heat and insects, autumn brought damp air and shorter days, winter brought a cold that seemed to settle into every object. The wooden stool beside the wall feels cold, the floor beneath the straw mattress feels cold. Even the air you breathe carries the sharp freshness of the night outside. You pull the blanket closer. The wool does its work slowly. It traps your body heat. It creates a small island of warmth. But everywhere beyond that small space, winter waits. For medieval families, preparation for cold months began long before snow arrived. During warmer seasons, people gathered firewood, repaired roofs, stored grain, and prepared clothing. The work was not dramatic. It was a steady collection of small tasks that determined how comfortable the coming winter would be. A stack of chopped wood beside the house represented future warmth. A repaired cloak represented future protection. A full storage room represented future survival. Inside the cottage, the evening routine changes during colder months. People go to sleep earlier because daylight disappears quickly. More bodies gather closer to the hearth. Blankets are shared, animals may be sheltered nearby, their warmth becoming another part of the household environment. The medieval home was not designed to defeat winter, it was designed to endure it. You imagine a winter evening centuries ago. Snow rests quietly on the thatched roof. The fields beyond the village are hidden beneath white silence. Inside, a family sits close together around the final flames of the day. A woman repairs a sleeve beside the fire. Someone carves a small wooden object. Children listen to an older voice telling a familiar story. The fire becomes more than heat, it becomes a gathering place, a source of light, a reminder that the darkness outside can be held back, at least for a little while, yet when everyone finally lies down. The fire cannot follow them completely, the hearth fades, the room cools, the blankets become their only defense. In wealthier homes, attempts were made to create warmer sleeping areas. Noble beds sometimes had thick curtains surrounding them, creating a smaller enclosed space where body heat could collect. These bed curtains were not only decorative, they helped block drafts moving through large stone chambers. Even castles needed help against winter. Their impressive walls were excellent at defense but not always at comfort. Stone absorbed cold during the day and released it slowly through the night. A beautiful chamber could still feel surprisingly harsh after sunset. The poorest households faced the cold most directly. A thin blanket, a simple straw mattress, a small fire carefully preserved. Every bit of warmth mattered. You listen closely. The wind outside has become stronger. The thatched roof whispers softly above you. The people around you shift beneath their blankets, searching for the warmest position without fully waking. No one complains. No one expects the night to be different. The cold is simply another part of life, a companion that arrives every evening and leaves every morning. As your eyes begin to close, you feel the strange comfort of understanding this. Ancient rhythm. Medieval people did not conquer the cold, they negotiated with it, they prepared for it, they learned to sleep beside it, and as the darkness continues, you will soon discover another unavoidable part of the medieval night. The small necessities that had to be handled even when everyone else was already asleep. The cold remains around you, even as the household sleeps. The heavy wool blanket protects your shoulders, and the straw mattress beneath you provides a familiar place to rest, but the medieval night continues to reveal small details that feel unfamiliar. In the darkness, every ordinary need becomes a little more complicated. Today, stepping away from a warm bed at night is usually simple: a short walk, a quiet hallway, a private room waiting nearby. But inside this medieval cottage, the idea of leaving your sleeping place after everyone has settled is very different. The room is dark, the floor is cold, the doorway leads outside into the night air, and so, beside many medieval beds, there was another object quietly waiting: the chamber pot, a simple container, a practical solution, something rarely mentioned in romantic images of medieval life, yet something that played an essential role in the nightly routine of countless households. You notice one sitting beside the wall. It is made from clay, shaped by a local potter, its surface plain and functional. Wealthier households might own chamber pots made from metal or decorated ceramics, but ordinary families usually relied on simple pottery vessels that could be emptied and cleaned regularly. It was not beautiful, it was not meant to be, it was useful. The darkness makes you appreciate why such objects existed. Medieval homes were not designed around nighttime convenience. Many cottages had only a single main room, and outdoor privies or latrines were often located away from the house. Walking outside during winter, especially after midnight, meant stepping into freezing air, muddy paths, and complete darkness. A chamber pot saved that journey. especially for children, the elderly, the sick, or anyone simply unable to brave the cold. You imagine the quiet movement of a household during the deepest hours of night. Someone wakes, a blanket is pulled aside, feet search carefully for the floor, a hand reaches toward the small container kept nearby. The movement is slow and familiar. No one lights a large fire. No one wants to disturb the sleeping room. A small candle may be used in wealthier homes, while poorer households often relied on memory and the faint glow of remaining embers. The task is completed quietly, then sleep returns. In larger medieval houses and castles, managing these nighttime necessities became more complicated. Noble households had more people, more rooms, and more waste to handle. Servants were often responsible for carrying chamber pots away in the morning, emptying them in designated places, and keeping sleeping chambers clean. This work was rarely noticed, but it was essential. The comfort of wealthy households depended on many unseen tasks performed by others. Even castles, despite their impressive appearance, faced practical challenges. Stone buildings contained guardrobes, small rooms built into walls with openings that allowed waste to fall away from living spaces. These were early forms of medieval toilets, though they were far from the private, comfortable spaces people expect today. The smell of daily life was always nearby: waste, smoke, animals, cooking, human presence. The medieval world was a world of close connections. Nothing was hidden completely. You look around the sleeping cottage once more. The chamber pot rests quietly in its corner. A folded cloth sits nearby. The wool blankets rise and fall with slow breathing. No one thinks of this object as unusual. It belongs here, just like the hearth, just like the straw mattress, just like the wooden beams above. It is simply another part of preparing for the night. The people of medieval Europe understood comfort differently. Comfort was not always about removing every inconvenience. Sometimes it meant finding practical ways to live alongside unavoidable realities: a warm blanket, a dry roof, a nearby chamber pot, a small flame waiting until morning. These simple things represented care. They showed that even in a world without modern conveniences, people still searched for ways to make life easier. The night grows quieter. The cottage settles again. The chamber pot remains forgotten beside the wall as everyone returns to sleep. But as you listen deeper into the darkness, another sound begins to appear: the voices, footsteps, and movements that could travel easily through medieval homes long after the candles had gone out. The chamber pot has been returned to its quiet place, and the household has settled once more into darkness. For a moment, everything seems completely still. You lie beneath the heavy wool blanket, listening to the slow rhythm of sleep surrounding you. The cottage feels peaceful, almost silent, but then a small sound appears. A wooden beam shifts above your head, a foot moves across the floor, someone whispers, a baby stirs. The medieval night was rarely truly quiet. The sleeping space that surrounded you was not separated by thick walls and closed doors. There were no private bedrooms protecting each person from the sounds of the household. Instead, voices, footsteps, and ordinary movements traveled freely through the same shared room. The home slept together, and it listened together. You turn slightly on the straw mattress, noticing how easily every sound reaches you: a cough from the far corner, the soft scrape of someone adjusting a blanket, the gentle creak of a wooden stool moved earlier in the evening. In a modern home, these sounds might disappear behind walls and separate rooms. Here, they become part of the night itself. The construction of medieval houses made this closeness unavoidable. Many ordinary cottages were built with timber frames filled with wattle and daub, creating walls that protected against weather but did little to block sound completely. Thin wooden partitions, hanging fabrics, and simple screens might divide areas, yet conversations could still travel from one side of the house to another. Privacy was limited. Silence was shared. You imagine a typical village evening. A family has already gone to sleep. The fire is reduced to embers, but outside, the world continues. A neighbor's footsteps pass along the muddy path. A dog barks once before settling down. A horse shifts inside a nearby stable. A wooden cart creaks as the cold night air causes the old wheels to tighten. Each sound enters the sleeping room like a small reminder that life continues beyond the blanket. Medieval villages were filled with natural noises. There were no engines, no electrical hum, no distant traffic. Instead, people heard the sounds created by living things and handmade objects. The rhythm was slower, but not always quieter. Inside larger homes and castles, the situation changed slightly. Noble families might have private chambers with thicker stone walls, curtains, and doors that offered more separation. Yet even these spaces were rarely completely isolated. Servants moved through corridors, fires required tending, and household responsibilities continued from morning until night. A castle was impressive, but it was not a retreat from human activity. Behind every quiet chamber was a network of people keeping the household alive. You picture a servant walking carefully through a stone hallway carrying a candle. The flame flickers, footsteps echo, a door opens softly. Even at night, someone is working. For ordinary families, nighttime sounds often became familiar companions. Parents learned to recognize different cries from children. Farmers knew the sounds of animals outside. People could identify the changing weather simply by listening to wind moving through the roof. The house itself became a kind of instrument. Every crack, every beam, every loose piece of wood had its own voice. A sudden creak did not always mean something unusual. Often, it was simply the building breathing. The cottage changed with the seasons. Summer heat expanded wooden beams. Winter cold caused them to tighten and shift. Rain affected roofs and walls. A medieval home was never completely still because it was built from materials that continued responding to the world around them. You listen again. The room has returned to its gentle rhythm. A sleeping child sighs. Someone near the hearth turns over. The wind brushes against the shutters. These sounds do not disturb the household. They belong to it. The people sleeping here have known these noises all their lives. They are not interruptions. They are reminders of safety, of family, and of being surrounded by others. The medieval night was not experienced alone. Even in sleep, people remained connected. The darkness outside might have been vast, but inside the cottage, every small sound confirmed that others were nearby. As your eyes grow heavier, the final candlelight disappears completely. The room becomes darker than before, and in that darkness, you begin to understand another challenge of medieval sleep, a world where night itself felt very different when the only light came from a small flame. The sounds of the cottage slowly fade, the creaking beams settle, the footsteps outside disappear, the voices that once traveled easily through the thin walls have become nothing more than memories carried by the darkness. Now, the room belongs to the night, and the night in medieval Europe was a very different place. You lie beneath the wool blanket, surrounded by shapes that are only barely visible. The familiar objects of the cottage remain where they were before sleep arrived, but without sunlight, they appear changed. The wooden table becomes a shadow. The hanging herbs become dark silhouettes. The doorway becomes a quiet opening into another world. Darkness was not simply an absence of light. It was a physical presence, something that filled every corner. Today, a person can reach for a switch and bring an entire room back into view within seconds. but for medieval households, light after sunset required effort, preparation, and resources. A small flame had to be created, a candle had to be made, oil or wax had to be stored, and every bit of light had a cost. The candle beside the bed was not something to waste. For ordinary families, candles were often made from tallow, rendered animal fat that provided a practical but smoky source of illumination. Wealthier households could afford beeswax candles, which burned more cleanly and produced a more pleasant scent. Yet even these were valuable items, carefully used rather than left burning through the entire night. You imagine a woman gently protecting a candle flame with her hand. The small light flickers against the wooden walls. Her shadow stretches behind her. She uses the flame only long enough to complete what must be done. Then it disappears. A darkness returns. This relationship with darkness shaped medieval life in many ways. People organized their evenings around the available light. Work slowed after sunset. Travel became more difficult. Many activities simply waited until morning. Night belonged to rest, but it also belonged to imagination. Without bright streets or glowing windows, the world beyond the doorway became almost invisible. Forests disappeared into black shapes. Empty roads became uncertain paths. Sounds carried farther because there was nothing to see, a branch moving in the wind, an animal calling in the distance, a shutter tapping gently against a wall. The darkness invited questions. Across medieval Europe, people carried many beliefs about the night. Stories of spirits, wandering souls, and supernatural beings were common parts of folklore. These beliefs varied greatly by region and community, but they reflected something very human. When people cannot see what surrounds them, the mind begins filling the empty spaces. You look toward the small window. Moonlight enters through a narrow opening, creating a pale line across the floor. Beyond it lies the village. Beyond the village lie forests, fields, and roads hidden beneath darkness. The night feels larger than the room itself. Yet medieval people were not simply afraid of the dark, they also knew how to live with it. They prayed before sleep, they shared stories beside fires, they created familiar routines that made the unknown feel smaller, a blessing spoken before bed, a candle placed beside a doorway, a familiar voice nearby. Small comforts mattered. Even wealthy castles, with their grand halls and thick stone walls, faced the same darkness. A noble chamber might contain beautiful candles, painted decorations, and expensive fabrics, but beyond the windows remained the same endless night. The difference was only in how brightly they could push it away. You watch the final flame disappear, the room becomes quiet again, but now the darkness feels different, not empty, full of history. Millions of people once lay beneath similar blankets, watching the same candlelight disappear, listening to the same night sounds, waiting patiently for dawn. They did not control the darkness. They simply learned its rhythm. The cottage rests, the village rests, the medieval night continues, and as the hours move slowly forward, another difference between their world and ours becomes clear. The bed itself was never just a place to sleep. It was also a reflection of who you were and where you stood in society. The darkness of the medieval night has settled completely now. The candle has disappeared. The village outside has become a quiet collection of shadows beneath the moon, and inside the cottage, everyone rests wherever space allows. The straw mattress beneath you feels familiar now, with its uneven surface and simple construction. But not everyone in medieval Europe slept this way. A bed could reveal almost everything about the person sleeping upon it: where they lived, what they owned, their position in society, their place in the world. The difference between a peasant's sleeping space and a noble's bed was not only about comfort, it was about resources, materials, labor. and the number of people available to create and maintain it, you leave the small cottage behind for a moment and imagine another room, far from the fields, a castle chamber. The walls are thicker, the ceiling rises higher, a small fire burns inside a stone fireplace, sending warm light across carved wooden furniture. At the center of the chamber stands a large bed, raised above the cold floor. This is a noble bed, and compared with the simple straw pallet, it seems almost like another world. The wooden frame is carefully constructed by skilled craftsmen. The mattress may contain softer materials such as wool, feathers, or layered fabrics. Heavy curtains surround the sleeping area, creating a smaller enclosed space where warmth can collect during cold nights. The bed is not simply furniture, it is a display. A wealthy household could use bedding to show status and success. Fine linens, embroidered fabrics, and colored textiles required time, skill, and expensive materials. A beautifully decorated bed announced that its owner had the wealth to command such craftsmanship. Even so, the purpose remained the same: to provide rest, to protect against cold, to offer a place where the body could recover. Now return to the village cottage. The difference becomes clearer. A farmer's bed might simply be a wooden frame or a pile of straw covered with rough linen. The mattress would be filled with materials gathered from the land. The blanket would be practical wool. The sleeping space would belong to the entire household, yet this simple bed also represented something important. It was made from the same world that supported the family. The straw came from harvested fields, the wool came from local sheep, the linen came from plants grown and processed by human hands. Nothing traveled far, nothing was separated from daily life. The contrast between rich and poor sleeping arrangements existed throughout medieval society, but even wealthy beds had their own challenges. Stone castles were cold, large rooms were difficult to heat, servants moved through noble chambers. The sounds of household activity continued nearby. A magnificent bed did not remove every inconvenience, it simply softened some of them. You imagine a noble woman preparing for sleep. A servant adjusts the heavy curtains around the bed, another places a warm brick wrapped in cloth beneath the blankets to take away some of the chill. Clothing is carefully folded nearby. Candles are lowered to smaller flames. Every comfort requires someone's effort. Meanwhile, in the cottage, a mother pulls a blanket higher around her child. The family shifts closer together near the warmth of the hearth. Their sleeping arrangement may be simple, but it is filled with the same human desire found in every home: to feel safe, to feel warm, to rest. Across centuries, beds have always reflected the lives of the people who used them. A royal bed tells a story of wealth, a straw mattress tells a story of patience, a shared blanket tells a story of community. Neither is only an object, each carries the habits, struggles, and hopes of the people who slept there. As the medieval night continues, you begin to notice another difference between past and present. The people sleeping around you are not only adults. In these crowded rooms, children also shared the same spaces, growing up surrounded by the sounds and rhythms of household life from their very first nights. The contrast between the grand castle chamber and the humble cottage slowly fades as the night returns to the small household around you. The wealthy bed with its curtains and fine fabrics feels distant now. Here, beneath the familiar wooden beams, the sleeping arrangement remains unchanged. Adults rest close together. Blankets overlap. Straw mattresses touch one another across the floor, and among them, children sleep, not in separate rooms, not behind closed doors, but within the same shared space where family life continues from sunrise until darkness. You look toward the corner of the cottage. A small child is curled beneath a wool blanket, one hand resting near a wooden toy left behind after the evening meal. Another child sleeps beside an older sibling, their breathing matching the quiet rhythm of the room. For medieval families, childhood happened much closer to the daily activities of adults than it often does today. The home was not divided into separate spaces for different ages. The same room held everyone, the same fire warmed everyone, the same sound surrounded everyone. A child waking during the night would not walk through a silent hallway toward a private bedroom. Instead, familiar voices and familiar faces were only a few steps away. The medieval household was built around closeness. This was partly because homes were designed differently, but it was also connected to the realities of everyday life. Space was valuable. Building extra rooms required materials, labor, and money. For many families, a separate children's sleeping area was simply not possible. Everyone adapted to the space available. You imagine the evening before sleep begins. A mother folds a child's small linen garment and places it beside the bedding. A father repairs a wooden tool near the hearth. An older sibling helps a younger child settle beneath a blanket. These small actions reveal how children were woven into the daily rhythm of the household. They watched, they listened, they learned. The sleeping area itself became another place where family knowledge was passed down. Stories were told beside the fire. Prayers were spoken before rest. Older children learned household routines by watching adults prepare for the night. Even the arrangement of sleeping spaces could carry meaning. Younger children often slept near parents for warmth and protection. Infants required constant attention, especially during the night, and keeping them close made care easier in a world without modern heating. Monitoring devices, or separate nurseries, the warmth of another person mattered, the sound of breathing mattered. A sleeping child was never truly alone. In wealthier homes, children of noble families might have had different arrangements. Some noble children were cared for by servants, nurses, or household attendants. Large castles had more rooms and more available space, yet even there, childhood was still surrounded by the movement of adults, a servant entering with clothing, a tutor arriving for lessons, a family member passing through the chamber. Complete separation between children's worlds and adult worlds was uncommon. The medieval home was a place of constant connection. You listen as the cottage rests, a child shifts beneath the blanket, someone quietly pulls the wool higher over small shoulders, a parent wakes briefly, checks the room, then returns to sleep. The gesture takes only a moment, but it says everything. Care did not always appear through grand actions. Sometimes it was simply noticing, adjusting, staying close. The night continues. Outside, the village remains hidden beneath darkness. Inside, generations share the same air, the same warmth, the same dreams. It is easy to imagine medieval childhood as completely unfamiliar, but these quiet moments feel surprisingly recognizable. A parent making sure a child is comfortable. A sibling offering warmth. A familiar voice nearby. The surroundings may be different. The human feelings are not. You close your eyes again and hear the soft movements of the household. The children sleeping nearby are part of the same story as everyone else beneath this roof. And as the night grows deeper, you begin to wonder what thoughts followed people into sleep during medieval times, and what they believed might visit them in the darkness of dreams. The children remain peacefully asleep beneath their wool blankets. Their small movements have become part of the cottage nighttime rhythm. A quiet breath. A gentle turn. The faint rustle of straw beneath a sleeping body. The room feels calm now, but for many people in medieval Europe, sleep was not only a time of rest, it was also a doorway into the unknown. When the candle disappeared and darkness filled the room, people entered a world where dreams carried meanings, where nightmares raised questions, and where the unseen parts of existence felt much closer than they do today. You lie beneath a blanket and imagine the thoughts of someone living. Centuries ago, the day has ended. The fields are silent, the fire has faded, the world outside the cottage has become invisible. Now only the mind remains awake for a little longer. A strange dream might begin with something ordinary, a familiar road, a person from the village, a field beneath the summer sun, but then it changes. The dream becomes confusing, a face appears that should not be there, a place feels unfamiliar, a feeling of unease remains after waking. Today, people might simply call it a dream, but medieval communities often searched for deeper meanings. Dreams were sometimes viewed as messages, warnings, or reflections of spiritual struggles. Religious beliefs played an important role in medieval life, and many people believed that the boundary between the physical world and the spiritual world became thinner during sleep. The sleeping mind was mysterious, and mysteries invited interpretation. You imagine an old woman sitting beside the hearth during the evening. A child asks why frightening dreams appear. She gently adds another piece of wood to the fire and shares a story passed down through generations. Perhaps she explains that certain prayers should be spoken before sleep. Perhaps she recommends keeping faith close during the night. These traditions were not unusual. Bedtime often included spiritual routines. Many Christians in medieval Europe prayed before sleeping, asking for protection through the night. Small religious objects, such as crosses or blessed items, might be kept nearby. The exact practices varied greatly by region and community, but the desire was similar. People wanted peace before entering darkness. They wanted reassurance. They wanted the night to feel less uncertain. Nightmares were sometimes explained through religious ideas, folklore, or beliefs about the body. Medieval medical traditions also connected dreams with the balance of bodily conditions, reflecting ancient theories about health that continued through the Middle Ages. The body and mind were believed to influence each other. A troubled stomach, an illness, a difficult emotion, any of these might affect the dreams a person experienced. You look around the sleeping room again. The same place that holds warmth and comfort also holds imagination. The shadows on the walls, the sounds outside, the feeling of lying awake while everyone else sleeps, all of these things could shape what the mind created during the night. For children especially, the darkness could feel enormous. A familiar object might become strange in the moonlight. A hanging cloak could appear like a mysterious figure. A creaking beam might seem like a message from somewhere unseen. But morning always returned. The first light through the shutters would reveal the ordinary world again. The cloak was only a cloak. The sound was only wood settling. The dream was only a dream. Still, the stories remained. Across generations, people shared explanations for the strange experiences that visited them while sleeping. These stories became part of village life, told beside fires and repeated during quiet evenings, not because people were constantly afraid, but because humans have always wondered about the hidden places of the mind. What do dreams mean? Why do certain images appear? Why do some nights feel peaceful while others feel restless? The medieval world had its own answers, shaped by faith, tradition, and imagination. As you return to the quiet cottage, the sleeping household remains undisturbed. The children dream, the adults rest, the fire waits beneath its ash, the night continues gently. And as the hours move closer toward morning, another part of medieval sleep begins to appear. The people who did not rest upon beds at all, but watched over the homes of those who did. The night has grown even quieter now. The family has settled into their familiar sleeping places. Children dream beneath warm blankets. Parents rest nearby. The cottage breathes softly beneath its wooden roof, but not everyone in medieval Europe slept on a mattress, not everyone had a blanket of their own. Beyond the comfortable image of a household resting together was another group of people whose nights looked very different: the servants. In wealthy homes, castles, and large estates, servants kept daily life moving. They prepared meals, carried water, maintained fires, cleaned rooms, cared for animals, and assisted the families they served. During the day, they were everywhere. But at night, they often disappeared into the edges of the household. You leave the noble chamber behind and follow a narrow passage deeper into the castle. The stone walls feel colder here, the candlelight is weaker, the polished rooms of the upper household are replaced by simpler spaces where workers rest after their long day. There is no grand wooden bed waiting, no heavy curtains, no fine linen. Instead, a servant spreads a blanket over a simple pallet placed near the floor. Sometimes this was inside a servant's room, sometimes it was beside the very area where they worked. A kitchen servant might sleep near the kitchen hearth to tend the fire early in the morning. A stable worker might rest close to the animals he cared for. A household servant might sleep near the chamber of the family they attended, ready to answer requests during the night. Their sleeping location was often determined by their duties. Work followed them even into rest. In medieval households, servants were not always treated the same way. Their experiences depended greatly on their position, the wealth of their employer, and the nature of their responsibilities. A trusted household attendant in a noble home might receive better clothing, food, and sleeping arrangements than a temporary laborer. But many servants lived with limited personal space. The floor was sometimes their bed, a simple straw pallet was sometimes their comfort, a corner of a room was sometimes their private world. You imagine a young servant finishing the final tasks of the evening. The kitchen has been cleaned, the last dishes have been stacked. The fire has been reduced carefully beneath ash. After a day spent moving through rooms that belong to others, she finds a small place to rest near the wall. She removes her shoes, folds her worn cloak, places her few belongings nearby. Then she lies down. The floor beneath the blanket is hard, cold, unforgiving, yet it is familiar. For many people throughout history, rest has often been found wherever space allowed. In monasteries, servants and workers also followed strict routines. Religious communities valued discipline and simplicity, and sleeping arrangements were often modest. Monks themselves commonly slept in shared dormitories rather than private rooms, with rows of simple beds or sleeping spaces arranged together. The idea of personal sleeping chambers remained uncommon for much of society. Privacy belonged mostly to the wealthy. Even then, it depended on the household. You return in your imagination to the cottage. The difference between the peasant family and the servant becomes smaller. Both understand the feeling of making do. Both know the value of warmth. Both understand that a good sleeping place is something to appreciate. A soft blanket, a dry corner, a little protection from the cold. These simple things mattered. The medieval night was shaped by position and circumstance. A lord might sleep above the great hall in a decorated chamber. A servant might sleep beside a kitchen wall. A farmer might rest on straw beside family members. Different beds, different lives, but the same human need for rest. The castle becomes quiet again. The servant closes tired eyes. The candle beside the corridor burns lower. Morning will arrive soon enough, bringing another day of work and responsibility. But for now, Even those who spent their days caring for others find a small moment of stillness, and as the sleeping world continues, another truth of the medieval bedroom begins to emerge. These spaces were not only places of rest, but also places where sickness, healing, and human vulnerability were quietly experienced. The servant's quiet corner of the castle disappears as the medieval night returns to the place where all people eventually found themselves, the bed. Whether made of fine fabrics or simple straw, it was where the body went when strength began to fade, and sometimes, the medieval bedroom became more than a place for sleep, it became a place of waiting, of healing, of care. When someone became sick in medieval Europe, there was no separate hospital room inside every home. There were no modern medical spaces where illness could be moved away from daily life. Instead, sickness often remained where people lived, among family, among familiar voices, inside the same room where everyone slept. You imagine the cottage after midnight. The fire burns low, a person lies beneath a wool blanket, their face turned toward the warmth of the hearth. A bowl of water rests nearby. A cloth has been folded and placed within reach. Someone sits close, watching carefully through the quiet hours. The household has changed its rhythm. The normal sounds of the evening have disappeared. The usual conversations have become whispers. The bedroom has become a place of attention. For medieval families, caring for the sick was often a responsibility shared among relatives. Women frequently played important roles in household care, preparing simple remedies, bringing food and drink, and staying beside those who were unwell. Knowledge of medicine varied greatly across medieval Europe. Some treatments came from ancient medical traditions, some from religious practices, and others from local experience passed through generations. Herbs were commonly used in household remedies. Plants such as mint, rosemary, and other medicinal herbs were valued for their practical uses. Clean cloths, warm drinks, and careful observation were among the many ways families attempted to provide comfort. Not every illness could be treated, not every person recovered, but care remained important. You see the small actions, a hand resting gently on a forehead, a blanket adjusted during the coldest hours, a candle kept burning longer than usual. The simple presence of another person nearby. The medieval bedroom held these quiet moments as often as it held ordinary sleep. In wealthier households, illness could transform larger chambers into places of extended care. Noble families had more space, more servants, and access to physicians when available. A sick person might remain in a private chamber while attendants brought food, medicine, and comfort, yet the experience was still deeply human. A person lying awake through the night, someone waiting beside them, the uncertainty of tomorrow, the hope that morning would bring improvement. Even castles, with their impressive halls and thick stone walls, could not separate people from sickness. The same human body existed beneath every layer of wealth. The noble bed might have embroidered curtains, a peasant's bed might have straw and rough linen, but illness made both places feel strangely similar. The room became quieter, the world outside became less important, the tension focused on one person, one breath, one moment at a time. You return to the small cottage, the sick person sleeps, the caretaker remains nearby, the rest of the household rests as much as possible, knowing that morning will bring new tasks. The bedroom is no longer just a place where the day ends, it is a place where people experience some of life's most fragile moments: birth, illness, recovery, loss. All could happen within these same walls. The medieval home contained the entire human journey. As the night continues, the person beside the bed finally closes tired eyes. The candle burns lower, and the room becomes peaceful again. Soon, the first signs of morning will arrive, the fire will be rebuilt, the household will wake, and after one more long night, the medieval world will slowly rise toward another day. The quiet hours of sickness and care slowly disappear into the past. The candle has burned lower. The room has grown still again. For a while, the medieval bedroom returns to its familiar purpose. A place of rest. A place where tired bodies recover after another long day. But the night never lasts forever. Slowly, almost unnoticed, the darkness begins to change. Before the sun rises above the fields, before the village paths fill with footsteps, there is a special moment when the medieval world begins to wake. The hour before dawn, you remain beneath the wool blanket and feel the first signs of morning approaching. The air is still cold. The floor remains hard beneath the bedding. But the darkness has softened. The outlines of wooden furniture become visible again. The small window no longer shows only blackness. A faint gray light begins to enter. For people in medieval Europe, waking before sunrise was a normal part of life. Without artificial lighting, the day was closely connected to the movement of the sun. People often slept soon after evening tasks were finished and rose early to make use of every available hour of daylight. The morning did not arrive suddenly, it unfolded slowly, a quiet transformation. You imagine a small cottage just before dawn. The family still sleeps, the fire has nearly disappeared beneath a layer of ash, then someone wakes. A person carefully sits up, trying not to disturb the others. Feet touch the cold floor. A hand reaches toward stored firewood. The first task of the day begins, reviving the hearth. A small flame appears, then another. Soon, the room begins to warm. The smell of smoke returns. The house begins breathing again. In farming communities, early mornings were especially important. Animals needed attention. Tools needed preparing. Fields waited beyond the doorway. The rhythm of work followed the seasons and the amount of daylight available. During long summer days, people could rise very early and continue working until evening. During winter, mornings were slower. The cold made every movement more difficult. You picture a farmer sitting near the edge of a simple straw mattress, pulling on a wool tunic while the rest of the household remains wrapped in blankets. Outside, frost covers the ground. The village is quiet, but the day is beginning. A stable door opens, a wooden bucket is carried toward a water source. A rooster calls from somewhere beyond the cottage walls. The sounds of morning slowly replace the sounds of night. The same was true in wealthier homes. Inside a castle, servants often rose before the noble family they cared for. Fires needed lighting. Rooms needed preparing. Clothing needed arranging. Food needed beginning. The great chambers that appeared silent at night became busy again with movement and purpose. Yet whether inside a cottage or castle, the first moments after waking shared something similar: the desire for warmth, the search for light. The beginning of another day, you look around the sleeping room one final time. The blanket lies folded. The straw mattress shows the shape of the person who rested there. The ashes wait beside the hearth. Every object carries evidence of the night that has passed. A medieval bed was not only a place where people disappeared into sleep, it was a witness. It saw families gather. It saw illness and healing. It saw quiet conversations before darkness. It saw ordinary mornings begin. The first sunlight finally reaches through the wooden shutters. The shadows retreat completely. The cottage is awake. Another day has started, and as you leave behind this medieval night, there is only one final place to visit, the quiet reflection that remains after the candles, blankets, and dreams have all faded away. The first light of morning has finally arrived. The darkness that surrounded the medieval bedroom for so many quiet hours has slowly disappeared. The shadows have retreated from the corners of the room. The wooden beams above no longer seem mysterious. The familiar objects of the night have returned to their ordinary forms: the blanket, the straw mattress, the small wooden table, the fading warmth of the hearth. Everything looks different beneath the morning light, and perhaps that is the most interesting thing about the medieval bedroom. It was never just a place where people slept, it was a place where people lived, through the long hours of darkness. These rooms held countless small moments that rarely appeared in history books. A mother adjusting a blanket over a child. A traveler sharing warmth with a stranger. A servant resting after a day of work. Someone sitting beside a sick family member through the quiet hours of the night. The medieval bedroom was not perfect, it was not comfortable by modern standards, it was cold, crowded, filled with sounds and smells that belonged to everyday life, but it was also deeply human. The people who rested there searched for the same things people still search for today: a little warmth, a little peace, a safe place to close their eyes. You imagine walking away from the cottage now. The door opens slowly. Outside, the medieval village has awakened. Smoke rises from rooftops. Footsteps appear on muddy paths. Animals begin their morning movements. The world continues. The bedroom behind you becomes quiet again, waiting for another evening when the same cycle will begin. Another fire will be lit. Another blanket will be unfolded. Another night will arrive. Centuries have passed since people slept beneath these wooden roofs, yet their routines feel surprisingly familiar. The materials have changed. The rooms have changed. The expectations of comfort have changed, but the simple act of ending one day and beginning another remains the same every night. Throughout history, people have placed their worries aside for a few hours every night. They have trusted the darkness enough to rest. The medieval world reminds us that sleep has always been something precious, not because it was always easy, but because it offered a moment of quiet in a world full of work, weather, uncertainty, and change. A bed made of straw and wool may seem distant from our own bedrooms today. A candle may seem small compared with modern lights. A shared sleeping room may feel unfamiliar, yet beneath all those differences was the same human experience: someone closing their eyes after a long day, someone listening to the final sounds of the household, someone hoping that tomorrow would bring another morning. The old cottage fades into the distance, the fire becomes a memory, the voices become softer, and the medieval night becomes only a story carried forward through time. Perhaps the most surprising thing about these forgotten bedrooms is not how different they were from ours, but how much they reveal about the people who rested inside them. They were not simply medieval figures living in a distant past. They were families, workers, travelers, children, people who felt tired at the end of the day, people who wanted comfort, people who searched for a peaceful place to sleep. So, as the morning light fills the room and the final traces of night disappear, imagine one last image: a simple medieval bed resting quietly beneath wooden beams, a folded blanket waiting nearby, a small flame returning to the hearth, and somewhere, many centuries ago, a person beginning another ordinary day. Not a king, not a hero, just someone waking up, ready to live.